V-Rising is an open-world survival game where you play as a weakened vampire who has wakened up after centuries of slumber, and you must rebuild your power from the ground up. You gather resources, craft gear, and hunt for blood to sustain yourself, all to conquer the world one territory at a time, while sunlight, humans, and monstrous creatures, as well as rival vampires try to kill you, mixing a Diablo-style combat with base building, castle construction, and boss-driven progression. Now, I've already played V-Rising all the way to the finish with the final boss, though I played it for my review on the normal difficulty slider. This time around, I'm going to be playing it on brutal mode, which I heard is really hard. Now, I did have some issues on normal mode, but how bad can brutal really be? Let's find out in today's playthrough video. So real quick, I will say that I did tune the settings a little bit. While the combat will be brutal mode, I made it so the crafting and gathering is going to be very easy because I didn't want to spend another 50 hours grinding up resources when I really wanted this to be more of a boss rush, as that's going to be the primary goal of this playthrough, is just to see how difficult the bosses are. Now then, I made my character, I quickly rushed through the little tutorial area in the graveyard and quickly went out into the woods where I started to gather up my small amount of resources that I would need to make my first armor set, being the bone set. After that, I quickly make up my first little base, and you're going to notice right away that base building is not going to be a priority in this playthrough either. On my main server, I've got a nice beautiful castle. Here, I'm going to make it purely functional. It's literally going to be a square with all of my workshop benches and refining stations completely cluttered together because I really do not care. I just want to get to the bosses. So I go and I gather up my first little bit of materials and make my first major weapon, only to hear something outside. As I go to investigate it, I actually find the first boss already dead. I don't know what had killed it, so I went up to get a free blood suck, only to then be surprised by a stone golem. I guess that's what killed Alpha. Anyway, I quickly sucked Alpha's blood, and I rushed back to my base to hide from the golem, all while trying to avoid the sunlight. Now, that was a bit of a cheesy way to get my first blood suck, so I do go back out and try to find Alpha to fight him the proper way. But before I do that, I head over to the copper quarry, which is literally right next to my base. Now, I still am a little bit low level, so I have to pull back the enemies a little bit at a time. I can't just rush on in and pull everyone all at once. Maybe later, but for now, I do that in order to be safe, and once I make my way in, I start gathering as much as I can, from paper in order to unlock new abilities later on, all the way to the copper, which is what I really want in order to make the first proper weapon to defeat Alpha as well as the bosses that will come afterward. So once I head into the quarry, I quickly dispatch everyone that was nearby and farm up as much copper as I can to make my first weapons. And you would have noticed there when I was harvesting the copper, the amount that I am gathering. As I said, I don't want to spend too much time gathering, I want to spend more time fighting. Now then, once I have the proper weapons, I find Alpha just outside my base, and I go ahead and I start fighting him. He's actually not too difficult. I felt like I would have been able to take him on without issue, only the Chaos Archer came out of nowhere and finished off Alpha for me. You know what? I say that's good enough. I was able to take on Alpha and not really have that much of an issue, so I'm not going to go in for a third fight. Now then, I head back to the quarry because the second boss is there. Now, I remember him being a little bit annoying when I very first fought him in normal mode, but really I took him out in about 2 tries because I wasn't expecting as much mechanics from him as he did give, which all in all comparative to other bosses in this game is nothing, but I went into this game completely blind. Now then, my first round on brutal mode, he did manage to kill me because again, I wasn't quite expecting the level of difficulty, but once I understood the mechanics of it, I went back in and I defeated him on my second round. Another thing that I didn't notice is that some of the chaos that he puts down onto the ground, you can actually run through it before it explodes, which definitely helped a lot once I learned that. Once I took out Errol, I headed back to my base and deposited all the copper into the furnace. Now, it's gonna take quite a while to cook up into the copper ingots in order to make more gear, so I needed something to do while I waited. So I decided I was going to take on another boss. I had a choice between the Frost Archer or the Foreman, which I believed would have been the easiest out of the two. Now, I am kind of right, but also the Foreman can be quite annoying. Now, something you are gonna notice with a lot of these bosses is very few of them I'm able to one-shot. Typically, I will die on the first round because I'm still learning the mechanics, but once I know what to do, I generally take them out relatively easy, with the mild exceptions of a few people that you'll see later on which completely annoy me. But anyway, the Foreman, all he really does is he can shoot his crossbow at you, he can throw a net which will root you in place, and he also calls in for backup. The backup is what's going to be the hardest part, as you're going to have to deal with all of that incoming damage. But if you can avoid them or use some AoE abilities in order to take them out, you can take the Foreman on pretty easy, as he himself is not too hard. Again, it did take me about 1 or 2 tries, only because I had to relearn the mechanics, especially on a harder difficulty, but once I was able to figure it out, I took him out and sucked his blood, gaining me the next unlocked abilities, and now it was time to take on the Frost Archer. But before that, I headed back to my base. I now have the research desk unlocked, which is going to be essential for me during this playthrough, as it's going to be how I unlock all of my weapon and armor upgrades. Now I go ahead and I set it down in my already crowded base, and I use what little paper I have to try my luck at the RNG, which, oh my god, I got exactly what I wanted on the first try, which was the exceptional copper spear. Now the spear is not my primary weapon of choice, but it's really the only weapon that I have unlocked besides the mace or axes, which are not really my favorite, so getting the exceptional spear was great. I go ahead and I upgrade right away, as well as upgrade my base to give myself some more room, because it is getting crowded fast, and I know I'm gonna need a lot more room for the upcoming items that I need to place down for progression. Now then, we're gonna go for the Frost Archer, but of course I run into the Chaos Archer on the way. I want to try to avoid her, but what's worse is that the Frost Archer happens to be in this garrison at the moment. Now, she's one of the bosses that can walk around on the road, and she can roam and go from town to town, but for right now, she was stationed at this garrison, so I had to clear out all of the enemies within before I had a chance at taking her on. Now, with her, she does do a wide barrage of attacks, as well as a lot of slowing moves, because, again, her element is ice. Now, here, I accidentally pulled her when I didn't want to, so I tried pulling back to reset her, but then I said, you know what, screw it, and I went in for the fight. She can also do AoE moves, as well as turn invisible and do barrage attacks. Now, they're really not too difficult to avoid, but if you do get hit, again, you are going to get slowed, which can definitely lead to a bad time. Now, at this point in the game, I have already locked a couple of abilities, some of which I will be using for a while, like the Chaos Bolt that I just did there. I don't quite remember the name of the attack, so apologies for that. Now, I almost get got, but as she goes invisible, I try my luck and I thrust my spear, managing to hit her. I don't know how I did, but I did, and I took her down. So I got pretty lucky there and was able to one-shot her. With her down, now I can place the leatherworking station, but I also realize that I'm getting crowded once again in my base. But now I can upgrade to a proper castle rather than just the barricades. So once I place down the leatherworking station, I go ahead and I upgrade the floor as well as the walls in order to make a proper castle. That way I can also move the mist brazier outside rather than needing it inside. That way I can expand out and eventually make a garden so I can harvest some herbs and make potions. Potions are going to be a godsend, but for right now, it was time to go fight Goreswine. Now, Goreswine is another boss that can roam the roads, but also has a base of operations where they like to chill out from time to time. I actually did not know that they like to hang hang out in this cemetery. Almost every time I saw them on my main server, they were always walking the road and getting into fights with other bosses. So I was kind of annoyed because now I have to deal with all of these skeletons as well as these necromancer priests and all these other kind of creatures in order to get to the boss. I tried clearing them out and pulling her away from the cemetery to give myself more room to fight and dodge her attacks, but it didn't work. Not only did she hit like a fucking truck, but also the sunlight was coming out, which I was not protected from. So I pulled back and was gonna try again later on once the sun had gone down. Meanwhile, I was able to make my first teleportation station. I was also able to upgrade my coffin into the stone coffin, as well as some other upgrades around my base. It definitely helped fill out the time while it was still daylight out, as there's not much I can do. While I can fight during the daylight, it is not ideal as it does do a lot of damage to you if you're caught out in the open. Now then, once nighttime hit, I returned to the cemetery. I cleared out all of the skeletons and I tried to fight Goreswine. Now there was an open area in the middle, so I tried fighting her in the cemetery, but I continued to run into the trees and gravestones as well as the walls that were around the area, leaving me very little room with all of her AoE attacks, which she has a lot of. She can also summon skeletons, which are quite annoying. Overall, this fight was going to be my first wall that I hit because it took way too long to fight her and take her out. As you're going to see here, I don't remember how many times I died to this boss, probably about 10 if I had to guess. There were so many times that I would get close, she would get so low health, and I would still be relatively full health, and then something would happen, and I would just lose all of my health in one shot. Yeah, I was getting very frustrated and annoyed with her. There were times that I had to take breaks, go back to my castle, and then try again later on. I even tried doing what I could to upgrade my equipment, which there was not much more I could do at this moment. Something I even did at this point is swap to the crossbow. Now, every weapon can be completely different in this game, and unfortunately some weapons are unlocked later on in the game rather than early on, such as the pistols, which are my weapon of choice for the combat of this game. So, because I don't have the pistols, I'm having to settle for the crossbow. My main way to play is I like to fire from afar with a ranged weapon, but focus primarily on using magic. Now, I don't have a lot of magic to use right now. I do have some, but it's not the primary spells that I would be using in this situation if I was better upgraded. So I'm having to do what I can. Now, the crossbow definitely helps me stay afar. This boss, it's gonna be definitely better because she throws down so much AoE that could just absolutely destroy you. So trying to focus on dodging while firing from afar and keeping your distance is gonna be the best. A lot of bosses are like that as well. It's not really recommended to go up close to them as they will absolutely demolish you. It's better to kite them with ranged weapons or spells, which is why my primary choice is the pistol. But for now, I'm having to use the crossbow. Now, I did keep failing, so I had to take a break. I went around, I tried to gather as much paper as I could in order to upgrade myself in the research bench, as I hadn't quite gotten the best armor I could yet of Act 1. So that was going to be my primary focus in order to make this fight a little bit easier. Once I managed to get some level of upgrades, I would eventually return back. But first, I come across the Chaos Archer. Now, I hadn't defeated her yet, and because I was now the proper level to take her on, I went ahead and did that. Now, the Chaos Archer fights almost exactly the same as the Frost Archer. The difference is the Chaos will leave wide ranges of AoE and area denial effects that you really want to avoid, and considering that she likes to roam a lot more than the other Archer, you're gonna have a difficult time fighting her if you're in a narrow passage like I was here. I had almost nowhere to run, so I continuously got hit and eventually went down. Now, that was just my first attempt, so I went to go try again, only to see that she was fighting Goreswine. Oh, well, hello there. So, Goreswine can roam around like I said, and sometimes I will often find her fighting the other bosses, which it happened to be the Chaos Archer. So, I went in there for a free drink of blood, and I decided to fight Goreswine while she was partial health from the Chaos Archer. Call it cheating if you want, but I'm gonna take it. Now, I'm not gonna go ahead and refill fight the Chaos Archer, I want to just continue on at this point. As for Gore Swine, now that we're not in the cemetery, I do have a little bit more area to run around in, though it is still a narrow passage in the woods with tons of trees and rocks, so I do have to be careful. But instead, now that I have my armor fully upgraded, I focused more on dodging and only hitting when I had a free moment, not standing in the green, when I could finally fight back. This finally worked out and I defeated Gore Swine. Holy crap. Yeah, she took quite a long time to defeat. And again, the Chaos Archer was a bit of a free kill, kind of like how Alpha was, but you know what? With how many bosses are in this game, I'll take it. Lydia unlocks a bag, which is pretty nice because now I can carry more items, but what I really wanted was from Gore Swine in order to make the base ring, because I had already gotten an upgraded ring from the research table, but it required the one before it in order to make it. Now that I have an upgraded ring, I bump up a lot of levels, all the way to 35. I'm pretty much almost fully upgraded for Act 1. Really now it's get good or you're not going to be able to defeat Act 1. But before I continue on with the other bosses, I decided to upgrade my base a little bit more. I expand out the area, I chop down some trees, and I plant my farm. Now I already have some seeds in order to make the blood rose as well as the fire flower and a few others, but I will require a lot more space later on because potion making, like I said, is going to be a godsend, especially with the elixirs later on, but that's not going to be until later. Now I didn't record it, but I did unlock the ability to subdue and tame some thralls in order to go and do things for me. Now, as you see there, I have my first guy, which I pretty much just got at the nearby quarry. I outfit him out and I send him out on his first task. If you're not familiar with V Rising, you can basically get these followers, or servants rather, and you can send them off on hunts, which will take some real life hours in order to complete, but when they do come back, they'll return with a load of resources depending on where you send them. But it also depends on their item level of the gear that you equip them with, if they'll be successful or not. Now it was time to fight the Armorer. Now the Armorer is very easy. I was able to defeat him on my first try both times I had fought him. Really, you don't want to be up close to him because he does hit pretty hard. This is where using a ranged weapon or magic spells will come in handy. He can summon in followers to help him fight you, but again, you could just avoid them pretty easy. He can throw things at you. Again, you can avoid them fairly easy. The most difficult of the fight is that he throws out all of these little tacks all over the floor, which if you put on the nearby armor, it makes you invulnerable. However, you cannot fight back. Use that time in order to run over the spikes and get rid of them in order to clear up the area. Once you do that, you can continue fighting him. Again, very easy fight. I beat him on my first try both of the times that I had fought him. So I went back to my base, I upgraded a little bit, and then I headed back out shortly after. The next boss to fight would have been Clint the Firestarter. Now, the exact same thing happened here as happened when I fought him on normal mode. So because you need a wide range to fight him, and there's a lot of enemies in the area, while he's circling around slowly, you can clear out the area, so it's a lot easier to fight him. However, while I was doing this, the sun came out, which meant I had to go hide on the stairs over here where there's a lot of shadow. You can hide here pretty much all day as the shadow doesn't really leave that area, though once it was close enough to nighttime, because there are larger rocks in the area, it gives you a good enough safe space in order to start the fight while waiting for nighttime to approach. So I went ahead and did that because I had already been sitting around for like 5 minutes waiting for the night to come. Now, Clint isn't too hard. It's mostly just a lot of AoE attacks, which have a lot of noticeable time to get out of the way. Really, the most difficult thing would be him running around and pulling all of the enemies in the area, which is why you clear it out before you fight him. Anyway, I defeated him on my first try, and it was now trying to take on the Fey Walker, since she was the closest one to me out of the next batch of bosses. Now, the Fey Walker can be quite annoying, but it only really took me 2 times to fight her, both on my normal mode and on brutal mode. The most annoying attack that she does is this one where it sends out these whiffs, but the whiffs kind of go back and forth, so it kind of disorients me, and I always end up running into it rather than away from it. That's really my biggest thing. Now, she did take me out this first time fighting her because of that, but on my second time around, I focused more on dodging rather than attacking, and only firing my spells or my crossbow when I had a clear opening to do so. So it it took a lot longer to fight her because I was more defensive rather than offensive, but because I nailed down the pattern of her attacks, I was able to go through the fight mostly unscathed. I did start taking a lot of damage toward the end there because I started to tunnel vision, but she did eventually go down and I was able to suck her blood. Now, I really should have taken on the fisherman next because he is the next one to fight, but he's all the way on the other side of the woods, which is why I took on the Feywalker first. Now then, it was time to take on the fisherman, and afterward I would take on the bear since the bear is close to the fisherman. On the way there, I stopped at the vendors in order to buy a couple of upgrades and items. I was able to also stop by my base and gather up some gems just outside. Luckily, I had gotten just the one that I needed in order to make my next upgrade. Now then, I headed northeast all the way to the fishing pond where I took on the fisherman. His fight is really fun. He basically will go around and fish up various, fish, and each one will do something different. Pufferfish will basically add an element of you need to dodge this or get hit, while the sea serpent will try to attack you. Now, if you hadn't noticed, on brutal mode, a lot of the enemies will not only get a buff in their attack and HP, but they will sometimes get additional attacks, moves, abilities, or they will get an additional phase. Now with him, on the normal mode, the sea serpent is a lot smaller and is a lot less of a threat. Here, the sea serpent is a lot larger and makes it so you need to keep moving around the circled pier or the sea serpent will attack you, and does quite a lot of damage. But again, it's really not that hard of a fight and I was able to take him on my first try. Now then, it was time for the bear. The bear is again pretty easy. It's a lot of AoE abilities, but it gives you plenty of time to go out of the way. She also does a charge attack, but she gives you plenty of warning ahead of time so you can get out of the way. She also summons little bears, but you can take them out right away as well. All in all, very easy fight. I've never really had much of an issue with her, even on normal mode or on brutal mode, so I take her out and I get the bear form, which will allow you to gather larger resources as well as unlock areas previously locked that were guarded or blocked by something you couldn't destroy with a normal weapon. Getting closer to the end now, but next we have to fight Nicholas the Fallen, who is a necromancer. Now, he is a little bit odd as he kind of fights similar to the Feywalker, where he does, I wouldn't say AoE abilities, but they're more of missile abilities that he'll shoot out and they'll go kind of back and forth in a wiggle pattern, but he does it all around him. This is another fight where you need to slow down and focus more on dodging rather than being offensive and only fire your attacks when you have a clear opening. He does not have a lot of health to begin with, so that is the proper way to do it. If you try to just DPS him down as quick as possible and tunnel vision, he will take you out really quick, especially with his Army of the Dead. Now, the Army of the Dead isn't too big of a threat, especially if you kite the bosses or the enemies like I do. Using AoE spells or an AoE attack from your crossbow, for an example, on the minions will take them down and make it a little bit more bearable. Once you can focus on dodging and getting out of the way, he will eventually go down. Now, he is one of the rare bosses that if you leave his arena, he will reset. So I did have to reset him a few times and I only died once, but I think I got him on my 4th attempt. He's really not that hard if you have a good start and you're able to dodge all of his abilities. But now it was time for the final boss of Act 1. Now, he is in this giant bandit fortress, which requires the bear form in order to get in. This is one of the few areas where the bear form is required to progress. If you do not have it, you will not be able to take on Quincy, the bandit king. Now, you can just run past all of these guys and not have to worry about them at all. I decided for my first run through, I was going to clear them out just so I can say that I've done it. So I go in section at a time, taking them on. I don't want to pull too many at once because they can still kill you if you're not paying attention, but section by section, I do manage to clear all the way up to the bandit king. Now, I don't fight him on the first round. What I do is I run in and I take out his guards because they do not respawn with him. They are completely separate entities. Once I take them on, I do kind of give a little bit of a fight back just to kind of test the waters with him, but at some point I do need to pull back and reset the fight. Though for the first attempt, it was not bad at all. I think I got him to about half health. Now, he is another boss that if you leave the arena, he will reset. His followers, on the other hand, especially the ones that he summons summons in, they can follow you out of the arena, but once he is reset, they will disappear. Now, let me tell you something. At the time of editing this video in particular, I'm already into Act 4. This is, I think, the hardest boss fight I had fought at this time because I had lost track of how many times I either had to reset him or that I've died and had to run back. He is absolutely insane to fight on Nightmare mode. On normal mode, I beat him on my either first or second try without issue. Here, he is a nightmare because of all of the chaos damage that he puts down on the ground, as well as his brutal attacks. You don't want to be up close to him at all because if he swings his weapon at you, it's pretty much over, so you need to kite him. It's also beneficial because of all of the chaos damage as well as the enemies that he summons in. Now, something I didn't realize at the start is just like with the Stonebreaker, the chaos damage that he puts down onto the ground, you have a short window to run through it before it explodes. I didn't know that, so I would use my dash ability to get out of the way right away as opposed to after it explodes. Therefore, it would leave me vulnerable for his charge attack, for an example. His charge attack was insane. It absolutely demolished me every time because I would have no more dash in order to get out of the way. He can also put up his shield and reflect back abilities to you, which also always got me. Now, it doesn't affect AoE abilities, so if you can, use your AoE abilities when he puts up his shield. He can also throw his weapon at you, which will root you in place. This is where I would want to use my dash ability because shortly after he would charge at you. Now, I know I sound calm while making this video, but Quincy absolutely destroyed me. As you see here, I'm taking a break, working on my base, and even going in to fight Putris the Rat because he is a boss I had completely forgotten about and is one of the last bosses of Act 1. So I went ahead and I summoned Putris real quick. He's not really that hard. He can disappear at times and summon in some other rats, but really, you just kind of fight him with some AoE abilities to take out the rats, shoot him when necessary, and that's it, just a one-hit kill. But with Quincy, like again, I said that I'm pretty calm while recording this video, but I was absolutely raging the entire time while fighting him. It took me a couple of real-life days and so many attempts in order to kill him, and every time he defeated me, yeah, I was kind of cussing and slamming my desk. He was absolutely annoying to fight. I had to take so many breaks just from him, but also from the game because of how many times he took me out. Eventually, though, I managed to focus on him and take him out. I eventually learned that I could run through the chaos before it exploded, as well as some other mechanics that I eventually developed a strategy in order to get around. But now it was finally over. Act 1 is complete, which means this is going to be the end of the first episode. I will continue on and make other episodes based on the different acts, which there are 4 of. So be sure to see more content of me taking out V Rising in brutal mode in the future. For now, I'm expanding out my base, upgrading where I need to, and getting ready for Act 2. Until then, I hope you stick around. Subscribe if you want to see more gameplay related videos. Make sure you check out my main channel, Excaligator Reviews, in order to see my review of V Rising from start to end, even though it's on normal mode, as well as other survival game reviews, and I will see you next time.